Nobody tells you about the night before. They tell you about the nerves. They mention the excitement. Your buddies make jokes. Your mother cries into a dish towel. Everyone has something to say about the big day. Nobody tells you that at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, you might be standing on a stranger's porch in the cold. And what you hear through a closed door will change everything you thought you understood about the person you were going to marry in the morning. My name is Nathan Calloway. I was 31 years old. I was a detective with the Raleigh Police Department, 3 years working cases that taught me what people hide and why, and what it costs them to keep hiding it. I thought that kind of work made you hard to surprise. I was wrong about that. Her name was Lily Tran, 27 years old, a graphic designer who worked for a mid-size marketing firm in downtown Raleigh, off Fayetteville Street. She had this habit when she was concentrating. She tilted her head just slightly to the right, like the answer to whatever she was looking for was hiding just off-center from where she was already looking. The first time I noticed it, I was done. We met in March of the previous year at a birthday party for my old academy partner, Derek Marsh. At his place in the Five Points neighborhood, string lights in the backyard, too much food, a cooler of beer nobody had bothered to fully ice. Lily walked over to where I was standing near the fence, holding a cup I hadn't touched, and said, without any preamble at all, "You're doing math in your head at a party. That's either impressive or sad." I looked at her. "What's the math?" She didn't smile. "You tell me." I laughed. That was it for me. Done. We dated for 13 months. 13 months of Saturday mornings at Pullen Park, of her falling asleep on my couch with a design brief open on her laptop and a half-eaten bag of chips beside her, of her laughing too loud at movies she'd already seen twice and being completely unapologetic about it. 13 months of knowing, the way you know things you can't entirely explain, that this was the person. I proposed on a hiking trail at Eno River State Park in April. At the overlook above the river, on a morning she thought we were just going for a walk. She was wearing old sneakers and a rain jacket and no makeup, and she was more beautiful than I had words for. I got down on one knee. She covered her mouth with both hands. She said yes before I finished asking. We set the date for the following June, 120 guests, a venue at the Umstead Hotel in Cary, a honeymoon cruise out of Wilmington that Lily had been quietly thrilled about for 6 months. Her mother, Margaret Tran, had been planning the centerpieces since approximately 5 minutes after I proposed. By the night before the wedding, everything was in place. The suit was pressed and hanging in the closet of my room at the Marriott on Glenwood Avenue. The rings were with Derek, who was my best man and would sooner lose a hand than lose those rings. The rehearsal dinner at a steakhouse in North Hills had gone smoothly. I had shaken hands and made toasts and smiled until my face ached. And then I was alone in my hotel room at 11 at night, and something was pulling at me that I couldn't name. Not about Lily, I was certain about her. It was something else, a detective's instinct, the feeling that something had been slightly off for weeks, and I hadn't given it the attention it deserved. Little things, a conversation she'd cut short, a moment where she'd looked at me with something in her eyes that wasn't happiness and wasn't sadness, something unresolved, something waiting. I'd told myself it was pre-wedding nerves. I'd told myself I was overreading. But you're a detective, Nathan. Overreading is the whole job. I got up, put on my jacket, told myself I was just going to drive past her mother's house. Margaret Tran lived in a quiet neighborhood in North Raleigh, a 2-story craftsman on Whitfield Drive where Lily had grown up. That was where Lily was spending the night before the wedding, the old tradition. I wasn't going to knock, I just needed to be less far away from her. I drove the route I knew by heart, pulled onto Whitfield Drive and parked along the curb, sat in the car for a long moment. Go back. Nathan, you'll see her tomorrow. I almost did. Instead, I got out of the car, walked up the porch steps quietly because it was late. Because I didn't want to alarm anyone, I was just going to knock softly. Tell her I loved her. Drive back. I never knocked, because I heard her voice through the door. And then I sat down on those steps and I did not move. I need to take a breath before I tell you this part. Because what I heard through that door was not an argument, it was not a fight. It was not anything I had been half prepared for on some subconscious level. It was Lily crying. Not the quiet kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. The kind that has been held too long and finally breaks the surface. Her mother's voice. Margaret, low and urgent, baby, you have to tell him. You cannot walk into a marriage carrying this. You cannot. Lily's voice, ragged and broken in a way I had never heard from her. Mum, I can't. I'll lose him. He'll think I'm damaged. He'll leave. Lily, I've been trying to figure out how to say this for 5 months. I don't know how to say it. Her father's voice then. David Tran, a man I respected more than most people I had met in my life. Retired engineer, coached youth soccer on weekends. His voice came in careful and steady. You say it the way you said it to us. You sit with him and you tell him the truth. He deserves the truth, sweetheart. He's a cop, Dad. He thinks about things a certain way. He's going to want to know the who and the how and the why, and he's going to look at me differently. I know he will. You don't know that. I do know that. I was not breathing. I was standing on a porch in North Raleigh at 11 o'clock at night, and I was not breathing. And then Lily said, quiet as a thread, pulled tight. What happened to me, what that man did to me, it wasn't my fault. I know that. But what he left me with, I have to live with it every single day. And now Nathan has to know, and he might not want me anymore. And I don't know how to asterisk. She couldn't finish it. Her mother said softly, the doctor says it's manageable. It doesn't define your life, baby. It already has. For almost 2 years. It already has. I sat down on the porch step. I'm not sure it was a decision. My legs stopped working, and I sat down and I stayed there and I listened to the woman I was going to marry cry on the other side of a door about something that had been done to her. To her, not by her. That distinction, I want you to hold that distinction, because it was the first thing that locked into place in my mind as I sat on those steps. My head went to anger, not at her, at whoever had done this to her, a clean, specific professional fury, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that gets very organized, very quickly. I had heard enough to understand the shape of it. Someone had attacked her. She had been infected with a sexually transmitted virus as a result. She had been living with the medical reality and the psychological weight of it for close to 2 years. While building a life with me and planning a wedding and smiling through every single one of it. And she had not said a word. Why? I had just heard exactly why. She was terrified I would look at her differently. That thought that she had carried that terror for nearly 2 years alongside everything else hit harder than anything else that night. I sat on that porch for a long time. Then I walked back to my car, drove to the Marriott, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at nothing. I did not sleep. By the time morning light came through the curtains, I had made 2 decisions. The first, I was not going to pretend I hadn't heard what I heard. The second, I was not going to let her walk down an aisle carrying that weight alone for 1 more hour. The morning of the wedding arrived the way mornings do, indifferent to your condition, fully committed to its own schedule. My phone lit up at 7 with a text from Derek. You alive over there? I typed back barely. I need to talk to Lily before the ceremony. Private. Can you make it happen? 3 dots. Then Nathan. The whole thing starts at 2. Hair and makeup is already... Derek. I need to talk to her. A pause. I'll make it happen. By 9 o'clock, I was sitting at Margaret Tran's kitchen table on Whitfield Drive. Margaret had made coffee without being asked and set a mug in front of me and sat down across the table like a woman who had been expecting this moment and was not entirely sure she was ready for it. David Tran stood by the window with his arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Something between respect and worry. I have delivered death notifications for a living. This was the hardest conversation I have ever had to begin. Lily came downstairs in a robe, hair pinned up loose, no makeup. She looked at my face and she knew immediately. The color left her. "Nathan." "Sit down, Lily." She sat. She looked at her hands. I did not waste time. "I came by last night," I said. I was on the porch. I heard the conversation." The silence that filled that kitchen was enormous. Margaret closed her eyes. David did not move. Lily looked up at me. Her eyes were already filling. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." She nodded, slowly. One tear moved down her face and she didn't wipe it away. "So now you know?" "I know part of it," I said. "I want you to tell me the rest, not because I'm a cop, because I'm the man who's supposed to marry you in 5 hours, and I want to hear it from you." She breathed, steadied herself, and then in a low, careful voice, she told me everything. It had happened in October of the year before we met. She had been living alone in her apartment in the Glenwood South neighborhood of Raleigh, on the 3rd floor of a building on West Lane Street. She'd come home late from a work event, a client dinner, and taken the elevator up. The building's main entrance had a lock that the property management company had been slow to repair. Residents had filed complaints for months. Nobody had acted on them. A man was in the elevator when it opened. She didn't know him, had never seen him before. What happened next? She told me the way someone tells a thing they have rehearsed in therapy and shared with very few people, without unnecessary detail, with a flatness that costs more than crying does, because it means you've had to make yourself go somewhere numb just to get the words out. She was attacked in that elevator. The man ran. She called 911 from inside her apartment. She was taken to WakeMed. She gave a statement that night. A report was filed with the Raleigh Police Department. The case was assigned to the Special Victims Unit. A detective named Carol Fitch was assigned to the case. The case went cold. The man had not been identified. 3 months later, in January, her OB/GYN told her she had tested positive for HSV-2, herpes simplex virus type 2. The forensic medical evidence from her assault examination had indicated possible exposure. The follow-up test confirmed it. She was 26 years old, sitting in a doctor's office, being told that a crime committed against her in an elevator had left a permanent mark on her body that she would manage for the rest of her life. She met me 2 months after that. She told me she had thought about telling me from the very beginning, and then she didn't because it was too early. And then she didn't because things were moving fast. And then she didn't because she was afraid. And then I proposed on a trail above a river, and she said yes before she finished thinking, because she loved me, and she wanted a life with me more than she had wanted anything. And then the months passed. The wedding got closer. The thing she hadn't said got larger and heavier and harder to lift. And by the Friday night before our wedding, she was in her childhood home crying to her parents because she didn't know how to say it and couldn't imagine her life if she did. She finished. She looked at me. I looked back at her. "Who is the detective assigned to your case?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "The SVU detective. Who was it?" "Carol Fitch. But the case went cold. Nathan, it's been over a year." "What's the case number?" She stared at me. Something moved across her face that I don't have a clean word for. Relief, maybe. Or the particular shock of being seen exactly as you are and not having the person in front of you flinch. That's the first thing you want to know. I reached across the table and took both her hands. "In a minute I'm going to ask you different questions, but right now I need that case number, because if there is a man in this city who did what he did to you and he is still out there, that ends today. That is not a request. That is a promise." She started crying again. Her mother pressed her hand to her mouth. Her father crossed the room and put his hand on my shoulder without saying a word. He didn't need to say anything. We talked for 2 hours. I asked her the questions I needed to ask, not as a detective, as her person. Was she seeing a therapist? Yes. Since the February after the attack, a trauma-focused therapist named Dr. Patricia Song at a practice off Six Forks Road. Was she on medication? Yes. Valacyclovir. Daily. Prescribed by her gynecologist. She had read everything. She had connected with an online support community. She understood the medical reality. Was she okay? She looked at me like that was the strangest and most welcome question anyone had asked her in a long time.
"I'm terrified," she said. "I'm sitting here in a robe on my wedding day telling the man I love something I've been afraid to say for almost 2 years. I don't know if I'm okay."
I looked at her for a moment. "What happens now," I said, "is I go back to the hotel, I put on my suit, and at 2 o'clock this afternoon, you walk down an aisle at the Umstead Hotel, and I'll be standing at the end of it." She went completely still. "You still want to?" It wasn't a question. It came out like something she was trying to believe. "I was on a trail above the Eno River," I said, "and I asked you to marry me because I knew, I still know. What happened to you before I met you does not change what I know." She put her face in her hands and cried in a way that was entirely different from the crying I had heard through the door the night before. That had been fear. This was something releasing. I held her hands and let her. And then I said, gently but clearly, this was not the end of the conversation. There were things we needed to work through properly, with her doctor, with her therapist, with time and honesty. A marriage couldn't carry a secret this size. Starting today, there would be no more secrets of any size.
"I know," she said. I should have told you so much sooner. I was just so afraid of losing you." "You're not going to lose me. But Lily, you have to trust me with the hard things. That is literally what I'm here for."
Her father made a sound from across the room that could have been a laugh, or could have been him clearing his throat with great conviction.
I chose not to investigate.
I drove back to the Marriott. I called Derek from the car.
"Is it still on?" he asked immediately.
"It's still on," I said, "but I need you to pull something for me before the ceremony. RPD case number SVU Detective Carol Fitch. I'll text it to you." A long pause. "Nathan?"
"Derek."
"Yeah, okay, yeah." The ceremony was at 2 o'clock. The Umstead Hotel's grand ballroom. 120 guests. Margaret Tran's centerpieces looking exactly as she had envisioned them for the past 14 months. A string quartet playing canon in D as the doors at the back of the room opened. I stood at the end of that aisle in a suit that had been pressed the night before by a man who had not slept. And Lily came through those doors on her father's arm. She was wearing ivory lace. Her hair was pinned up. She had been crying 90 minutes earlier. And you would never have known it. She looked like the version of herself she was working toward. Not the version that had spent 2 years being afraid. Something else. When David placed her hand in mine, he held on for just a second longer than the ceremony required. I looked at him. He gave me one small nod, the kind that doesn't need words because the words would only make it smaller.
Our officiant, Reverend Carla Montgomery, led us through vows I had written myself and nearly didn't get through, not because I was sad, because I meant every word so much that the words were almost too large for my mouth.
When she pronounced us husband and wife, Lily pressed her forehead against mine before I could kiss her. She whispered something I won't repeat here. Some things belong only to the 2 people who were there. Then she laughed, that too loud laugh I had loved from the first night I heard it. I kissed my wife. We did not leave for our honeymoon the following morning. The cruise out of Wilmington was postponed. Lily called the travel agent. I called my supervisor. Derek covered for me at work with the discretion of a man who understood loyalty without needing all the details. On Monday morning, I walked into the Raleigh Police Department in civilian clothes with my badge in my pocket and my wife's permission to do what I do. Detective Carol Fitch was a 12-year veteran of the Special Victims Unit. A measured woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes, and the particular economy of movement that comes from years of walking into rooms where the worst things have already happened. She looked at me across her desk and said,
"You're the husband."
"I'm the husband. She called you this morning." "She did. She told me you might come in." Carol opened a drawer and placed a file on the desk between us. Thicker than I expected. Case went cold in February of last year. The building's interior elevator camera had been manually disabled approximately 48 hours before the incident. I felt that settle in my chest. So he knew the building. Almost certainly. No DNA match in the national database, no witnesses. The exterior door malfunctions had been reported by 11 separate residents over a period of 4 months. The property management company had documentation of every single complaint, and no record of a single repair. Who managed the building? A company called Aldridge Property Group, offices in Ghana. They contracted maintenance to a crew of 19. Keycard access logs. Carol looked at me over the edge of her reading glasses. "You want to consult on this, Calloway? I want to close it." She held my gaze for a moment. Then she slid the file across the desk. "I will not walk you through every step of what followed. Some of it remains part of an active prosecutorial record. Some of it is not mine to put into a story. But I will tell you what we found, plainly. The building on West Lane Street had its maintenance contracted entirely through Aldridge Property Group, cross-referencing keycard access logs which the company initially claimed had not been retained, but which their own IT vendor had archived in a backup system the company apparently forgot existed. With staff schedules for the week of the incident produced 5 names. 3 were cleared within 48 hours. 1 had been out of state for the week on documented medical leave. The 5th was a man named Calvin Drury, 36 years old, a maintenance supervisor who had serviced Lily's building on a rotating schedule for 18 months. He had unrestricted keycard access to every floor. He had filed a service ticket for the elevator in Lily's building 13 days before the attack, a ticket logged as resolved with no corresponding work order attached. He had used the ticket as a pretext to document his presence, to establish a paper trail that looked routine. He had disabled that camera himself. His DNA was not in the national database because he had never been arrested, but a former colleague had filed a written complaint with Aldridge's HR department in 2021, 2 years before Lily's attack, describing behavior that should have ended his employment immediately. The complaint had been received, logged, and buried. When the SVU obtained a court-ordered DNA sample, executed on a warrant built from the keycard evidence, the ticket irregularities, and the 2021 HR complaint, the result came back in 11 days. A match to the forensic evidence from Lily's examination at WakeMed. Calvin Drury was arrested at his residence in Ghana on a Tuesday morning in August by Detective Carol Fitch and 3 other officers. I was not there for the arrest. I had been kept at arm's length from the final operational steps for legal reasons, which was correct procedure. I respected it. Barely. He was charged with first-degree forcible rape, breaking and entering, and criminal tampering with security equipment. The Wake County District Attorney's Office filed the charges. Drury's attorney entered a not guilty plea. He went to trial the following February 19th. Courtroom 3210 in the Wake County Justice Center on McDowell Street in Raleigh. I sat in the 3rd row in a dark suit next to my wife. Lily held my hand from the moment we sat down. She did not let go. The jury had been out for 12 hours when they filed back in. The room went so quiet you could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. The jury 4-person, a woman in her 50s, reading glasses, grey scarf, stood and read the verdict without any theatre at all. Guilty. First-degree forcible rape. Guilty. Breaking and entering. Guilty. Criminal tampering. Guilty. All counts. Lily did not make a sound. She sat perfectly still and did not make a single sound. Calvin Drury was sentenced to 23 to 30 years in the North Carolina state prison system. The judge accepted the verdict without comment and remanded him immediately. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Lily pressed her face against my shoulder and stayed there for a long time.
I did not say anything.
There wasn't anything to say that the moment hadn't already said better.
I want to tell you where we are now, because that is where this story actually lives.
Lily still sees Dr. Patricia Song, her therapist, twice a month. She has described therapy as the hardest thing she's ever done and the most important. She says it differently now than she did in the beginning, with less apology in it. She is on a daily antiviral regimen. She has educated herself completely on HSV-2 management. She has connected through a private online community with other women navigating the same reality, some of them assault survivors, some not. She is not ashamed. She will tell you herself that it is ongoing work, but she is getting there. She told me once, after a particularly hard week, that the worst part of what happened to her wasn't the physical reality of it.
It was the silence she'd built around it.
The way she had convinced herself that the truth would cost her everything, when in fact the secret had been the thing costing her every single day, invisibly, in ways she couldn't fully measure.
I wish I had told you sooner, she said.
I wish you had too, I told her, but I understand why you didn't, and I'm here now. That's the whole of it. I want to step outside the story for a moment and say something directly. Herpes simplex virus type 2 is one of the most common viral infections in the United States. According to the CDC, approximately 1 in 6 Americans between the ages of 14 and 49 carries genital HSV-2. A significantly larger number carry HSV-1. The vast majority of people who carry the virus have no idea, because most cases are asymptomatic or produce symptoms mild enough to be dismissed as something else entirely. The stigma around herpes is, by any honest measurement, wildly out of proportion to its medical reality for most people. It is a manageable chronic condition, not a death sentence, not a moral judgment, not the end of intimacy or love or marriage. People with HSV-2 who take antivirals and communicate honestly with their partners live full, healthy, intimate lives. What Lily experienced acquiring the virus as the direct result of a sexual assault is not uncommon. And assault survivors who carry that additional layer of reality often carry it in silence because the shame that was never theirs to own gets grafted onto them anyway. It should not. The shame belongs to the perpetrator.
Every single time, without exception.
If you are a survivor carrying a secret like the one Lily carried for 2 years, please talk to someone, a doctor, a therapist, a person who loves you. The weight of it alone is not something you are required to carry. And the people who truly love you will not leave.
I want to say that again.
The people who truly love you will not leave. And if you are the person someone loves, and they come to you with something hard, be the kind of person they don't have to be afraid to tell. That is the whole job. In a marriage, in a friendship, in a life. We rescheduled the honeymoon for October, after the arrest. 7 days, a cruise out of Wilmington, down to the Bahamas and back. Lily wore a yellow sundress on the first day aboard. She ate conch fritters off a street vendor's cart in Nassau, like she had been doing it her whole life. On the second night, we sat on the balcony of our cabin watching the water go dark as the sun went down, and she leaned her head on my shoulder and didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "This is the first time in 2 years I haven't been waiting for something to fall apart." I told her nothing was going to fall apart. She told me I couldn't promise that. I told her she was right, but I could promise to be there regardless of what fell. She was quiet for another moment. Then she told me to stop being smooth. We are still working on that. My name is Nathan Calloway. I am 32 years old. I am a detective with the Raleigh Police Department and a husband in that order on my badge, and in the opposite order in everything that matters. My wife is Lily Calloway. She is 28 years old. She is the most courageous person I have ever known. and I have known a great many courageous people in this line of work. The craftsman on Whitfield Drive is still there. Margaret Tran still keeps the yard the way she always has, like it's something worth tending, even on the days when it doesn't seem to need it. The porch where I sat that night, I've been back there many times since. Lily thinks it's strange that I like to sit out there. I've never told her why. Some places become important in ways you can't fully explain. That porch is where I made a decision about what kind of man I wanted to be, not a decision to stay. Exactly. It wasn't a hard decision. It was more like a clarification. The rest of it, the years ahead, the hard conversations, the work of building something real with someone real, has been trying to live up to what I understood on those steps.
I think that's what love actually is, when you take away the easy parts.
Not a feeling you have once and keep. A decision you make and then make again.
Every day. I want to ask you something directly.
If you were standing on that porch, if you heard what Nathan heard, what would you have done? Would you have knocked? Would you have walked back to the car and told yourself it was none of your business? Would you have waited until after the wedding? Tell me in the comments, because I think how we answer that question says something real about who we are. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a like so more people find it. There are more stories like this one ahead. Stories about the people who showed up when it counted.
This is one of them.